All right, so, we're talking, Moses talking to the people. They are camped on the plains of Moab on the far side of the Jordan River. They have not yet crossed over into Canaan. Moses is not going to be permitted to lead them in. And in fact, he's going to be dead in just a couple of weeks. So we're at the very end of his life, and Joshua will have to take up the reins and lead them into the Canaan and start, a pretty severe campaign to conquer the land. So Moses is given the final instructions and repeating a large portion of the law that we've already read in the book of Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers. This is Deuteronomy means second law. It's not a new law, but a second telling of it. So you're getting a recap of many things that have come before. So this is laying out all the ways that this nation is going to be governed. Criminal law, civil law, marriage, divorce, property rights, inheritance rights. The Lord is very, very specific for how the nation of Israel is going to be structured. So what we're going to pick up with in 25 is when you have a controversy between two individuals, what are they going to do? So if there be a controversy between men, and they come unto judgment, that the judges may judge them, then they shall justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. Okay? This is a high-level summary for what a court does, what a judge does. You have people who are arguing, again, whether this is a criminal matter or whether this is a civil matter, most likely civil, as in you're not going to be punished necessarily, but you've got an argument over whose stuff belongs to who, or you've done something, or someone's accused you of doing wrong, and you're trying to figure out who done it. So this is the role of the judges, that they would have to listen to these two controversies, the two men, and determine which one was in the right, justify, say, okay, this person was righteous, this one was wrong. So condemning the wrongdoer. So in that scenario, if the judges determine that a punishment is required, there's limitations on what they could give. And if it so be, and it shall be, if the wicked man be worthy to be beaten, then the judge shall cause him to lie down and to be beaten before his face according to his fault by a certain number. All right, so there's a concept in our court systems that the punishment must fit the crime. And so the number of stripes or beatings, blows that this person would receive would be in respect to the offense. What did they do? And so it would have to be carried out right there. This is not mob or vigilante justice, but this was calm and determined by the judge, and it would take place in his presence. And it would be a certain number. It wouldn't just be until somebody's arm got tired. All right? But there's a limit. God imposed a limit in verse 3. 40 stripes he may give him and not exceed. This is the maximum. Right? Our judges in the federal court system have sentencing guidelines and sentencing's maximum. So a particular crime, you can't, if you've stolen something, it's a loaf of bread, I can't give you 20 years in prison. That's beyond the maximum allotment. And so here God is defining this is the extreme end for a punishment to receive by corporal punishment or beating. Now, in our society, we're very much jail-oriented, right? We understand someone does wrong, we put them away in a box for a time, and maybe we let them out later. There's not an equivalent back then, right? A holding cell was really just a place to hold you until the judge could get to you and then decide your punishment. Whether that was to be kicked out of the nation altogether, or if it was a capital crime to be put to death, or something else, restitution, you've got to pay back something. And so when the judge sees you, you expect to receive the punishment right then. There's not big delays. So this is one of the tools he had was for, a public corporal punishment. So this is for an adult. This is not talking about a child getting spanked. This is talking about an adult man who has committed some crime, and they are going to either use a whip or a rod Okay, but the max is can't go above 40. Right? 40 stripes he may give him and not exceed. And there's a reason. Lest if he should exceed and beat him above these with many stripes, then thy brother should seem vile unto thee. Okay? God is preventing them from being unjust. Remember, there are rules within this structure that protect Israelites at a high standard. They're all brothers and sisters of the same family. And so he's saying that if they were to just mercilessly wail on them beyond this limit, then that individual, in the eyes of those who are conducting the punishment and who are observing, the individual has now become vile or despised or contemptible. So it goes beyond, you've committed a crime, here's your punishment, and now we're going to move forward to, we've made you something less than. You're not one of us, you're whatever it is, but this is something that God determined that this level of injustice is too far. Okay? So God is preventing that. So this is the maximum that a judge could have the discretion to assign. You say, well, this is a lot of detail, Brother Jonathan. Why are you going into it? You ever remember why the Apostle Paul noted about how thrice he had been beaten 40 times save one? So that was part of the way that the Jews would enforce that, is that to make sure we never go above it, we're going to maximize our beatings at 39. So Paul got that 3 different times. And so that's what this is an allusion to. Okay, we're not going to go over, but we're going to do it 39 times. So, all right. Any questions on that? And again, sometimes this can be difficult in Deuteronomy, particularly if you're just kind of jumping in, because we're covering a whole swath of topics. So we're going to jump from how do you handle this controversy, and the judge determines somebody needs a disciplinary punishment, to let's talk about oxes. Verse 4. Thou shalt not muzzle the ox when he treadeth out the corn. Now, I sent a text message to everybody, and you probably thought that was really random, of cows. Why is Brother Jonathan sending us text messages of cows? Well, if you notice, those cows were tied in a line, tied to a center post. So if you've got these cows in a line in a center post, and something's encouraging them to walk, where are they going to walk? In a circle. Right? It's the kind of idea of the guy who doesn't want to mow his lawn. He ties a string to the post, and the lawnmower goes. Never tried it, but what a farmer would do is he's harvested his grain. All right, does grain come ready to be ground and milled? No, right? It's got the stalk, it's got the husk around it. You got to get it out. So there's a process called threshing. Now there's different techniques for that. Sometimes you're whacking it with a stick. Sometimes you're taking animals and letting them walk on the grain for you. The ground where it's done is called a threshing floor. So it's a relatively level floor. Sometimes there's a curb around it that keeps the grain inside of it so you're not losing it. And you have these oxen or animals walking around, and by the weight of their feet, they're kind of mashing things up. They're doing the work for you, okay? This is not when it's all out in the field, not when you're plowing. The grain is in, it's harvested, and you're chunking the straw and everything in there. They're smashing it down. And then later, you'll take your fan, your winnowing fan, and you'll blow the chaff or the broken up pieces of husk away. Say, okay, that's a lot of agricultural information. What's the deal? Well, verse 4 says, thou shalt not muzzle the ox when he treadeth out the corn. That's the process we're talking about. Treading is literally to walk upon. As they're walking upon the grain, going around that post, you're not allowed to cover his mouth. If his mouth is uncovered, what can he do? Eat. Now, is he working? Yeah, you better believe it. And the farmer's getting the benefit of his labor. And so here, God is designating that you cannot withhold this working animal from being able to eat while he's working. Okay? You're like, well, that's interesting. Why is that in there? I mean, does God show mercy to animals? Yes. Yes, he does. And Proverbs talks about the wise man who cares for his animals. However, it's not just that. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, the Apostle Paul is being challenged by some folks at Corinth on whether he's a real apostle or not. And so one of the ways he's responding to them is whether or not he has the powers and authority of ordained minister of the gospel, including the right to stop working, making tents, and to be supported by the churches so he can continue to minister and teach. Now, he chose not to do that. He's going to get to that at the end of the letter, but he's going to lay out the principle. He says, 1 Corinthians 9:6, "Or I only and Barnabas, have not we power to forbear working?" As in somehow we're at some lesser status. And he asks the question, "Who goeth a warfare any time at his own charges?" All right, so if you're drafted in the military, are you supposed to support your own salary while you're working? Oh, they pay your way. They feed you. Who planteth a vineyard and eateth not of the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth a flock and eateth not the milk of the flock? So this is a husbandman in a vineyard. He's expected to get some benefit of the grapes he's growing. A shepherd, the same thing. Say I these things as a man, or saith not the law the same thing? Verse 9. For it is written in the law of Moses, Thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. Oh, what's he quoting? Deuteronomy 25. And Paul asks, Doth God take care for oxen? Is this written just for the oxen's benefit? No. Or saith he altogether for our sakes? For our sakes, no doubt, this is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and he that thresheth in hope should be a partaker of his hope. So those who are working and expecting there to be a harvest at some point, that they get to participate that down the road. So verse 11 is key there. If we have sown unto you spiritual things, right? Sowing is planting seeds, right? Paul is teaching these spiritual things unto you, is it a great thing if we reap your carnal things, right? Food, clothing, those things that were necessary for him to continue to function. Is that a great deal? If others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things, lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. So he's like, we have this right. We have chosen not to use it because he didn't want to have anybody say that he was teaching so that he could get rich or that he could have stuff, right? He's going to be an evangelist, all these new areas, and so he doesn't take anything from them, so there's not even the scintilla of wrongdoing. All right? Verse 13 says, Do ye not know that they which minister about the holy things live of the things of the temple? Well, he's going back to the Levitical priesthood. Those that worked in the temple, the Levites and the priests, they didn't have an inheritance among the land, but a portion was gathered up from all the other tribes, and that was what was feeding them so they could be about the ministry of serving God in that structure. And they which wait at the altar are partakers of the altar. Same concept there with the priests. So that was the Old Testament model. Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which should preach the gospel should live of the gospel. All right, so you got like 2,000-year gap between Moses giving this law and then Paul explaining, what is he talking about? This is a forerunner pointing towards being ministers of the gospel and living by it and teaching by it. So that's what Deuteronomy 25 is talking about right there. Just one verse, right in between beatings and when brethren who live together die, what you have to do with that family situation. All right? Any question on 25:4? All right. Okay, 25:4. We have a very specific scenario. All right? If brethren dwell together. All right, we're not talking brethren in the broad sense of all Israelites are brothers and sisters. We're talking about your actual brother. If you live in the same farm with your brother, right, probably your dad's not dead yet, right? You're all working the farm. But if you live together and one of them die and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. All right, so in this hypothetical, you have at least two brothers. One is married. He has no children. We have another brother who's not married. The one who's married dies and has no child. The widow was not required to go out and find, a new husband among strangers, but rather there was a duty put upon the surviving brother to marry her. And that was not a short-term thing, because there's something that's going to come from this, but this was marry her, take her to wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother unto her. Well, the duty of the husband's brother is twofold. One is to marry her, but two, it's what happens with your firstborn child. It's not going to be considered your child. It's going to be considered the child of your dead brother. The reason is that they don't want the lines of these men to extinguish, right, to end. If you don't have a living son, you can't pass down your property to him, right, and it just stops. And so this was a way that it would continue. So it shall be that the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. All right? So that's the general rule. This was a duty. This wasn't voluntary. Okay? This was an obligation that God is protecting these widows and also that family, so that there was a way that widow could have a son and an heir from her dead husband. Okay? This is not the scenario in Boaz and Ruth. Okay? Ruth's husband was dead, but so was his brother. He had no living brothers. Boaz is operating not as a brother, but as a kinsman redeemer, and that's why we're going to talk about what happened in that scenario a little bit differently. But let's continue this hypothetical. Okay, so let's say that the brother doesn't like her. I mean, this is reality. It's one thing to have it saying you must do this, but then you're, well, I don't really care for her. I'd rather not. What does she have to do? What rights does she have? Well, it lays it out. Verse 7. And if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go to the gate unto the elders. All right, the gate is the gate of the city. That's where public things happen. All right, if you got to have that controversy to settle between the judges, you're doing it out in front of the gates. It's not behind closed doors. It's big, it's broad, it's public. So you've got this public gathering. That's where the elders are seated. You go to the elders and you say, my husband's brother refuseth to raise unto his brother a name in Israel. So she's not just saying he won't marry me, but he's refusing to honor his dead brother by giving him, the child in this way. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. All right, so she lets the elders know. She turns it over to them. What do they do? Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him. So they're going to try and talk some sense into him. And if he stand to it and say, I like not to take her, so their attempt to persuade him fails. Okay? Then shall the brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders. So she talked to them first. They go get the brother. They talk to him. He doesn't do it. She comes back, got both of them all together. Very public thing. So in the witness of the elders, the widow takes the shoe from off his foot and spits in his face. And shall answer and say, so shall it be done unto that man which will not build up his brother's house. So this, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. It's a shame for you. And so it's an embarrassment, right? This is a public shaming. He's not getting beaten for it, but he's being publicly shamed that this is what God said was an obligation. You're not following through, and you can't hide, basically. All right, so the taking off of the shoe and being spit in the face, that's a very shameful thing. And in fact, he's got a new nickname. His nickname, his house, is going to be called in Israel, the house of him that hath his shoe loosed. Now, I'm sure schoolyard bullies could come up with a snappier way to say that, but there's old Shoeless Joe or something, I don't know. But the idea is that this shame is going to continue to follow him. Okay? Now, this is given in the law. By the time you get to Ruth, you're probably 100 years later. Boaz was born of first-generation parents, but he was an old man by the time you were with Ruth. And so he wasn't a brother, but there was a near kinsman for Ruth. And so he goes to her, and this is Ruth chapter 4 if you want to read it. He goes to him, presents all the elders, and it's funny, he says, "Ho, such a one." Hey man, stop here. We got to talk. You have the right to redeem the inheritance of Naomi. Her husband's dead, her 2 sons are dead. And he's like, sweet. And then he says, but you've got to also get Ruth in this process. You got to marry her. And the guy's like, I don't want to mess up my inheritance. And we don't know his situation. He may have already been married. We don't know. But he's like, I don't want to mess up my inheritance by doing that. He says, I'm going to yield. You marry her. And so Boaz says, okay. And to solemnify the occasion, what he does is he draws off his shoe voluntarily and hands it to the kinsman. And so Boaz has this very public way. There's no shame associated with this, but he's now a public way of transferring the right to redeem it. So no one can say, well, I had the right to redeem that and you didn't give me a chance. The shoe's been tossed or whatever. All right. So there's a little bit different, scenario and a little bit different dynamic, but you can see how that custom was drawn from this when it was given its original law. So I'll give you a little bit more flavor when you read Ruth. It's only like 4 chapters, so that's fun. You're seeing the origin story behind King David. All right. Now, again, we're bouncing around. So we're going to go from loose-shoes widows to verse 11. When men strive together, one with another, and the wife of one draw near to deliver her husband out of him that smiteth him. All right, so 2 guys are fighting. The wife tries to rescue her husband, but in the process, she decides that she is going to put forth her hand and take the aggressor by the secrets. Just grabbing him by the balls. All right. The answer for this scenario is, this is probably the most justifiable time when someone could do that, and even there, God says, nope, not acceptable. All right? So don't give any kind of man-made excuse, even in this, where humans would say, well, we could understand. The response is, she's going to lose her hand. Thou shalt cut off her hand, thine eye shall not pity her. All right? So the short answer from that is, that's never okay. Don't do it. Better let him beat your husband up. Or fight some other way, but not there. All right? Again, talking about punishments and crimes and criminal law and what's going to be permissible and what's not, and this was not. All right? Now, I sent y'all another couple random pictures. One was of a scale, and the other was some weights that you put on that were in our measurement systems with pounds and ounces and whatnot. So imagine back in the old days, when I wanted to buy a certain measure of grain, well, we put it on a scale. I had to have some weight so I'd know when I had the right amount. Well, if you as the dealer have different size weights and they all say, well, this is pound, but you got one that's a little smaller or a little bigger, then you can cheat your customers. And so that's what's going on here, is that thou shalt not have in thy bag divers weights of a great and a small. So you don't need to cheat by tipping the scale in your advantage. What would be an example today, if you go to the butcher and he's putting your deli meat on it and he's got his thumb on the scale, right? He is tipping the scale in his advantage by doing something where you don't know it, but he's not paying, you're not receiving what you're paying for. All right, so we're talking about just business practices. Thou shalt not have in thine house diverse measures, a great and small. So you can't have it in your bag. You can't even have it in your house. Now, if you've got it in your bag, you're out and about in the market, you're really likely to use it. You can't have it back in the house where, all right, I'm going to go meet with, Parrish today, and I don't really like him, so I'm going to get my other stones, and I'm going to cheat him today, and then I'll swap them back out. So it doesn't matter. Don't own them. Don't have them with you. No concealed carry. Don't have them back at the house, locked up in the safe. None. Rather, thou shalt have a perfect and just weight. A perfect and just measure shalt thou have, that thy days may be lengthened in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. What's implied? That's a threat. If you do have these things, your days can be shortened. All right? And then we got some really strong language. For all that do such things, and all that do unrighteously, some very broad language, are an abomination unto the Lord thy God. Abomination means something that's disgusting, abhorrent, loathed, contempt, vile. This is talking about the persons doing this, not the things. God is very serious about sin. And this, language of abomination, this is the same language he used when he's describing, necromancy, witchcraft. So this is the expression, it's just good business, should never come out of your mouth to justify doing something that's wrong, unjust, untoward, unethical. Okay? All right. Any questions on that?
Go ahead.
Yep.
Somewhere in here, you always say, I say give the benefit of the doubt, or give, if you were weighing something, and you couldn't get as accurate as you should be, then the buyer should receive the better portion, correct?
I can't say for the buyer or seller, but from my perspective, wherever I'm sitting, I'm more comfortable with the other person getting that, the gray area in their favor than mine. But we're not talking gray area here. We're talking about intentionally acting to deceive.
But I just thought about
yeah.
Gray area.
Yeah. Everything should be above board all the time.
Similar language in Proverbs.
Oh, frequently used in Proverbs. This is the fool who's trying to cut the corners and get rich quick and deceiving people, whereas the wise man is righteous in all his endeavors. So yeah, that shows up quite a bit in Proverbs about the weights. All right. Verse 17 is going to be a little bit of a history lesson. Remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way when thou wert come forth out of Egypt. Well, what did he do? Well, how he met thee by the way. The way is the road, right, or the route. How he met thee by the way and smote the hindermost part of thee. All right, you got this long group of folks traveling, 600,000 men, and their wives and their children and their cattle. The slowest and the weakest are going to be at the back of the train, right? These guys, the Amalekites, came out and attacked the back of the train. The caravan, however you want to describe it. The hindermost part, even all that were feeble behind thee, when thou wast faint and weary, and he feared not God. Now, you got to go back to Exodus 17 to read the account of what happened. Well, let me back up and say, Amalek is a distant cousin of Israel. Okay, Jacob, Israel, and Jacob is Israel, same person. And they had a twin brother, Esau. Esau had a son named Eliphaz and a grandson named Amalek. So you're talking about Esau's grandson versus the descendants of Jacob. And so they're coming out of Egypt, and Amalek sees an opportunity. You've got these mobile refugees who spoiled Egypt, by the way. They've got stuff. They're not poor refugees. And they attack them. And this is when Joshua goes out to fight the people, and Moses goes up on the hill, and he's got the rod of the Lord. As long as his hands are holding it up, the Israelites are winning. But he's old. He gets tired. His hands go down. He's 80-something years old. And the Amalekites start winning. Well, his brother and brother-in-law, Aaron and Hur, wind up holding up his hands and putting a rock underneath him, and he stays that way. I'm sure his hands are so numb. End of the day, and they win the battle. Okay? Well, God said then that he was going to remember what Amalek had done to his people. And so this is what this is the sentence that God was pronouncing upon them. Therefore it shall be, when the Lord thy God hath given thee rest from all thine enemies round about thee, in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it, so that's a timing information, that thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Thou shalt not forget it. They have a death sentence put upon them as a whole people. The timing of it will be much later. right? Not in Joshua's day. They've got to conquer internally. It's not going to be until King Saul, 450 years later, because you have the whole period of the Judges. So you got Moses' death, you got Joshua leading for a time, and you got 450 years in the Judges. Then King Saul starts his reign. During Saul's reign, Samuel tells him, you go and you wipe out the Amalekites. And he did mostly. But he spared the king, and he spared some animals, and by his disobedience, God rejected him from being king. You know why David was going to be anointed to be king? Because of this right here, where it says, thou shalt not forget it, he forgot it. He partially did it. It wasn't spare some of it, it was wipe it out from under the sun. So God's condemnation upon that nation was there for like 5 centuries before he brought the hammer down. Deuteronomy chapter 25. A lot going on.